Good afternoon. We welcome you to West Valley City Council meeting. We'll begin with the electronic meeting statement. Pursuant to Utah Code, West Valley City has determined that this meeting will be held electronically without an anchor location given the ongoing novel coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. West Valley City has determined the pandemic presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at an anchor location. This meeting will be held electronically. Members of the press and public are invited to view this meeting live on YouTube at www.youtube.com/user/WVCTV. Thank you. We note that all council members are in attendance at our meeting. And so it's good to have you all here. We'll continue electronically for a while. But next on our agenda will be the approval of the minutes of January 19th. Well, the approval and or modification and approval in case there's any changes.
Move for approval of the January 19th, 21 minutes.
And the second?
Second.
Okay, it's properly before us. Looks like they're okay the way they are. Then all in favor of approving the minutes of January 19th, doing this electronically, without objection, the minutes will stand approved. Hearing no objections, that passes unanimously. Okay. Reviewing our agenda for regular meeting tonight. Any concerns there? Anything anyone wants to bring up? There were no changes or additional information. So hearing none, we'll move on to our resolution 21-15. This one is making a statement of support for needed transportation infrastructure funding and other solutions for West Valley City and the west side of Salt Lake County. And so I don't know if Wayne, if you wanted to make some comments at the start of this and if others were going to chime in.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor.
Yeah,
I will make a comment and then I'll give a couple minutes to Nicole, if you will. So you might be wondering where this is coming from. We always support additional transportation funding in West Valley and regional projects and goals, right? Here, however, very specifically and recently, probably prompted by the upcoming legislative session, we've had a couple of other entities that we work with ask for support in sort of a unified approach for that. I think Dawn had mentioned a week or two ago a request by West Side Growth Coalition, just as an example. A lot of times these goals don't necessarily specifically match up to exactly what West Valley wants, but at the same time, we do support regional improvement of and progress of that system. So we did want to show some or express some support in that way. So we have put together this resolution in a fairly broad coverage of the subject. And with that, Nicole, did you want to add anything more specific to the purpose or entities out there that are also involved?
Nope, I would just say that that's right. And as the council knows, we do take this kind of a statement very seriously. It does have impact. And so we want to always be cautious about how we term this support and what that is looks like and is used for by these outside entities, because we certainly wouldn't want to give mixed messages out there as we're seeking our own transportation funding outside of regional transportation type funding. And so it's always, as a staff member, it always makes me nervous to endeavor to do that. But I think this resolution hopefully meets all of those objectives and does that in a way that facilitates those discussions, both for you as council members and as we work at the legislature. So that's it. Thanks, sir.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Okay.
It looks to me to be just what the Western Growth Coalition asked for.
I would mention two items that maybe Wayne and Nicole see what their response is. One was, it would be nice to include some sort of a statement that transportation affects not only the residents of West Valley City, but businesses and therefore economic development. And, you know, that's pretty significant. And then I thought of another one. The second one was West Valley City is a major location for northwest travel for the west side of the valley. You stop and think, I-215, Redwood Road, Bangerter Highway, 5600 West, Mountain View Corridor, U-111 all go through West Valley City. And that affects the cities to the south of us. So we play kind of a key, or we have a kind of key location and to some degree responsibility for transportation that affects those people. And those of you who have been on those know that a lot of those people on those roads aren't just West Valley people, and they aren't just for businesses in West Valley. They go right down to those other communities as well. I don't know if the council thinks that we ought to include that. It just seems like, you know, that's a pretty significant thing, and we work with them, these other communities often, and that. And I like what was put together. It was a very good resolution, and I think is enough. The concern I had with the Western Growth was they actually listed a number of projects and started, you know, identifying things. And I say, well, and yes, those relate to Wasatch Front Regional Council issues and et cetera. But I think when you get all those people together, it's better to be a little broader rather than specific projects, even though there were projects in West Valley. Anyway, what do you think of adding those comments or having staff work something up to add those? You feel comfortable with that? If you'd rather keep it this way, it's not a big deal, but I kind of like highlighting West Valley's important place in connection with the other cities in the south part of the valley. You know, we mentioned the airport, the link there, but all that traffic from the airport goes through us to the rest of those cities, as well as a lot of other stuff. Anyway. Concern, hearing no objections or concerns. I did state that broadly, but I would rely on staff to put together more succinct statements that reflect kind of those thoughts, and that would reflect obviously that they're familiar with the tenor of the council to make it align with the general feelings of the council over time. So anything else there? Hearing nothing further, next is our consent agenda. We have a number of items on here. 2,700. They're back. It's more easement purchases, temporary construction easements, some perpetual easements on 2,700 West. And a lot of these, of course, are not right on, well, excuse me, they're essentially all on 2,700 West. It may not be that their addresses are on 2,700 West. They're actually facing some of the feeder streets into 2,700 West. So do you have any questions? We've seen others before. And I guess the only question I would raise for staff would be, there's nothing unusual about any of these. These are the routine ones similar to what we've been doing for months on 2,700 West. And there'll be more.
They are,
Mayor?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just had one question. A and
Sure.
B has the exact same address. Are there
Yeah,
two property owners?
I was going to mention that. So on the actual paper on Resolution B, the address is 4155. So it just got transferred over at 4131. 4131 is A, 4155 would be B.
I think that's correct. I'll ask Russ to both confirm that and then answer the other question as well on the, is there anything unusual about any of them?
Yeah, that appears to just be a typo, so we'll get that corrected. But yeah, there's these are very similar to all the other construction easements that have been acquired and perpetual easements. This is for a project that we are working on with UTA. UTA actually received a federal grant to provide last mile access to their system, and this project is. The intent of this project is to build a bike lane on the shoulder of the road of 2700 West. So obviously to do that, we needed to widen the road. And at the same time, we wanted to do the same kind of aesthetic improvements that we did between 3500 South and 4100 South. So that's what these easements are for. The first group is 20 different parcels that go from 4100 South to 4270 South. And so we've got almost half of them already to the council, and you'll be seeing more of those.
Yeah. Any other clarifications? Hearing none. Russ, thank you. And we'll move on to communications. We have a presentation discussion on the Bangerter Highway interchange. And
So Mayor, if I can introduce that.
sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So back in December, the council met and we had a discussion on looking at several different options for recommendations to UDOT on Bangerter Highway interchanges. 3 options were selected back then for further study. These generally favored mobility and connectivity over impacts. And since that time, our consultant, Avenue Consultants, has been working hard on traffic modeling and applying the traffic that's generated in this area to these 3 different options to see how well these options handle that traffic. And I'll turn the time over to Blake here in a minute to explain what they found. But just giving you a look forward, we'll be back in 2 weeks to show you the actual layouts of these 3 options, the actual footprints that would be impacted on the ground with these 3 different alternatives. So let me just mention, though, that despite all of the hard work that has gone into this, and it has been a lot over the last few weeks since we last met, I mean, this is still a relatively high level look at what needs to be done. The state is, as you are all aware, is conducting a state environmental study, which will begin essentially right on the heels of our study. And they will be looking at all the different issues, which, we don't have time nor the budget to evaluate. And that's really UDOT's job. So this study will give us some information, ammunition, if you will, to go to UDOT and say, this is what the council prefers, and we would like you to look at these options and try and incorporate this into what you're doing. So with that, I'll just turn the time over to Blake and let him kind of review where we were last December, and then what has been determined since then.
Thank you, Russ, and thanks, Mayor and City Council, for allowing us to jump in on your study meeting and provide you an update with where we're at on the Bangerter Highway study. My name is Blake Ungren. I'm with Avenue Consultants. I'm a traffic engineer that I've worked a lot with Russ and his staff on several projects throughout the years in West Valley City, and I love your city. I love working with your city staff. They're great to work with and innovative and thoughtful. And so we're excited to be here. I actually have Greg Sanchez on with us and Ivan Hooper. They're both traffic engineers as well, who've been helping with the study. So if there's a few questions that come up, they may have the answers that I might not have. So I am going to share my screen without further ado. And you should be seeing a title page. Hopefully, do I sound all right too? Do I sound okay? I'm not. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So this is our second update to the City Council. If you recall, we met in December to talk about the several different options that we've been studying, and identified some options that we have carried forward into evaluation. So here we are today on our timeline, where we have now evaluated those options that this group here has selected, the three options, and we'll talk about what those options are. And because we are meeting with you in 2 weeks from today, I just want to let you know we have already actually started on developing concept layouts because of the timeline, because of this tight timeline. They're not complete yet, so we will save that discussion for next time. But today we want to discuss the results of our traffic evaluation. But first, a quick refresher on what we've accomplished to date. So this is our study area. This is Bangerter Highway that you see here, this blue line. North is to the right, 4100 South is on the left end, our southern end of our project, while SR 201 is the northern end of our project, which is on the right. You can see here that there are several connections to and from Bangerter Highway to date, at 35th South, 3100 South, Parkway Boulevard, and 2400 South and Frontage Road. So quite a few connections through here, which we have discussed in the past, and we're going to continue to discuss that. And recognizing that UDOT is going to make the final decision on this, our project objective, again, just to reiterate, is to evaluate options to provide recommendations to UDOT for the best balance between impacts and mobility for West Valley City. And some of this, we're just going to go through again, just as a refresher. So I'd like to discuss real quickly the impacts of mobility that I mean by that. So impacts are potential conflicts or effects on businesses, front, backyard landscaping, community assets, right-of-way, strip acquisitions, full acquisitions, visual impacts, noise, environmental, and so on. While mobility is how easy it is to get around, connectivity, maintaining access to and from Bangerter and from the frontage roads that we're going to be talking about, as well as providing opportunities for reduced traffic congestion on Bangerter, and then also those east-west side streets that we'll be talking about. So, and again, I just want to reiterate that even though UDOT will make the decision, UDOT does have a good track record of working with and listening to West Valley City staff. They view West Valley City as a great stakeholder, and again, this information will help the city in coordination with UDOT. So One more reminder of what we did before we dive into the details. As we've been looking into these options, when we took an initial look at these concepts the last time we met, we compared them one to another so we could better understand how they perform relative to each other. We did this by performing a high-level evaluation of project objectives, and these are our objectives here, which typically we do for studies like this. So we've looked at how well an option avoids impacts to the surrounding environment based on all these things that we talked about a second ago. We've also looked at how well an option does at providing connectivity or access to and from Bangerter. And finally, we utilize the travel demand model, which is our software that helps us predict traffic patterns and changes with these options and how that change affects congestion. The information from the travel demand model was used to help us understand how these options reduce congestion on both streets and on Bangerter Highway. As I mentioned earlier, these comparisons are relative to each other. So based on the evaluation, each objective was given one of 3 scores based on how they compared to the other options, lowest, middle, and highest. So let's say if the connectivity objective for a specific option shows the lowest, then that option is one of the lowest at providing connectivity. And finally, as we went through these options at our last meeting, we saw our high-level evaluation summarized in these tables, in these formats, which helped us understand how each option is performing compared to the other options. So again, there's a lot of unknowns that can significantly influence that final option that UDOT selects and how they design it. For example, and we mentioned this last time, but the Jordan Valley Aqueduct runs down the center of Bangerter Highway from the southern end of the project, limits to somewhere between 3100 South and Parkway Boulevard. This 60-inch pipe has at least a 50-foot easement that currently overlaps Bangerter and does not allow for any structures within that easement. This type of facility could greatly affect any of these options in ways that we cannot predict or plan for as part of this study. And I just want to remind everybody that we are taking kind of a high-level look at this so we can have a broad understanding or a general understanding of the constraints as well as what these options look like. So this, along with many other unknowns, will be addressed during UDOT's environmental study and will ultimately influence how these options are designed and implemented. So I'd like to jump to the end of our last discussion. So this is what we came down to back in December and review the decisions that we made as a city council here with the city council. So this table should look familiar. It's a summary of all the concepts that we reviewed, that we discussed at our last meeting. And these are the 3 options that we selected. I'm going to just shrink it down now to a smaller table so it's easier to look at. So the first was option 3B, which includes 6-lane commuter lanes between 3500 South and SR 201 with a 4-lane frontage road. And in this option, the 4-lane frontage road does not have any connection to or from the commuter lanes, which are the kind of a freeway system in that area. We'll talk about it a little more. We'll look at some graphics to help us understand what that looks like. Option 6, which includes this middle one here, includes a 6-lane freeway with frontage roads from 3500 South to SR 201. These frontage roads have on and off ramps to the freeway, which we sometimes refer to as slip ramps. And option 7 is similar to option 6. However, the frontage roads, instead of running on the outside of the freeway, they actually run down the center of the freeway. Therefore, we're calling it the center running frontage road. And based on our last discussion, these options were selected because they were the most likely to provide the best connectivity and the least amount of congestion. And you can see that over here on the right side of the table, where we see these are all the highest at potentially providing or reducing congestion and providing connectivity. However, the trade-off, as we discussed, is that these options will have the widest cross-section, which will result in the most impacts. So that's why these are the lowest here at avoiding impacts. So to accommodate better connectivity to West Valley City side streets, along with better traffic operations, the options will have a wider roadway footprint overall. So I just want to make that clear as we get into these. So here is that first option, that option 3B, just so we can look at it graphically. This is in the packet that we provided. So if you wanted to look at it, you can as well in that packet. But this is the 6-lane commuter lanes plus the 4-lane frontage road system. The commuter lanes start at 3500 South. That's what these blue lines represent, where we go from a 6-lane freeway and then it splits into 3 northbound lanes on the east side and 3 southbound lanes on the west side. There is no connection. This center line right here represents the frontage roadway. There is no connection from the commuter lanes to the frontage roadway. However, there is connection on the side street from these side streets to these frontage roadway system here. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means from a connectivity standpoint here in a minute. Option 6 is our frontage road option, where our frontage roads are represented by these light blue lines here. And our freeway system runs down the middle here, which is this dark blue with kind of a light, like a white line down the middle. So, and what that is the frontage road. So the freeway runs this entire length here up to 201. But then from 3500 South up to SR 201, we have some frontage road systems that connect to the side streets between SR 201 and 3500 South, and then also have these on and off ramps, which are represented by these orange lines, which allow access from the frontage road system to the freeway system. And so these are much like any on ramp or off ramp that you'd see at an interchange, but what it does is it accommodates on and off traffic from a frontage road system, and also provides great connectivity to your local roads throughout this area. Something that we wouldn't have been able to do had we just put an interchange at Parkway Boulevard. Rather, we have an opportunity to still provide that same connectivity as if we were to have an interchange at Parkway Boulevard to get on and off the freeway, but also connect to other surface streets throughout West Valley City. The final option that we looked at and that was selected was the center running frontage road. So it's similar to the one we just looked at. However, the freeway flip-flops with the frontage road. So now the frontage road actually travels down the center of the corridor, while the freeway travels on the east and west sides of the frontage road. So they're actually on the outside side of the road, pushing that freeway system closer to these residential communities and to these businesses. And this is all schematic. So, even though it looks like we're over the top of all these businesses and properties, this is definitely not to scale. So you can't look at it from that perspective, rather just to help you understand how the operations work. So again, the freeway travels up to 3500 South, and then it splits. The northbound 3 lanes travel on the east side of the frontage road system, and the west and the southbound freeway lanes travel on the west side of the frontage road system. And we again have these on and off ramps, which we refer to slip ramps, that provide connectivity from and access to and from the frontage road and the freeway system. It's connecting all this together through this area. So those were the 3 options that were selected in our last meeting. I want to take you now we've performed traffic evaluations on these 3 options, and I want to provide you with some summary of that. So first, I wanted to walk you through a few things in your packet that we sent you. The first section of the packet shows the schematics, which we just went over, of the selected concepts. The next section in that packet you will see are exhibits with summaries of the traffic volumes. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on these exhibits, but I wanted to orient you to what you are looking at so you can better understand what's there. So each exhibit has a legend. The arrow for each vehicle turn movement represents the direction. So this little arrow right here represents the direction of the turn movement that the specific traffic volume is associated with. So these are the specific traffic volumes. This arrow in the legend is a right turn. So it shows it turning right. So it would represent a right turn volume that we are projecting. The first set of numbers outside of the parentheses here represent AM peak hour volumes, while the second set of numbers inside the parentheses represent the PM peak hour volumes. And to not overcrowd these figures, because there is a lot of information, we have separated the traffic volumes for each option into freeway volumes or commuter lane volumes, and also a frontage road volume exhibit. So there's 2 exhibits per option. So you'll notice that there are 6 total exhibits in this section. So as you go through that, you'll notice some are for the freeway and some are for the frontage road volumes. Finally, on the frontage road volumes exhibits for each option, you can see a summary of the total intersection volume for both AM and PM peak hours. And so that just provides you with a little understanding of how each of the intersections stack up with the total volume that's going through that intersection from all approaches. And like I mentioned, we're not going to dive into the details of these traffic volumes, but there's a lot of thought and effort that goes into how we develop these traffic volumes, which we end up using to create reliable traffic microsimulation models that help us understand the operations on the corridor. So we ran both the AM and PM peak hour traffic volumes through complex traffic modeling software called VISM to determine how each option performed. Thus, the next section of your packet that you'll see that we will spend more time discussing summarize the results of our traffic intersection operations analysis. There are 2 pages in this section of your packet. The first page is the traffic intersection operation results for the AM peak hour operations for all 3 options. The second page is the PM peak hour operations. The legend on the first page, on both pages actually, shows a circle with a gray X in it. And these circles, which you will find at each intersection on the corridor, represents the intersection's level of service, or LOS, as we show here, or level service. The level of service is how well an intersection operates based on how much delay vehicles experience while waiting to travel through an intersection. In the circle, you will see a letter from A to F, A being the best traffic operations and F being the worst. Also, you will see colorful arrows approaching the intersection. This represents the delay associated with the intersection's approach. These arrows will be colored differently based on how well they perform, how well these approaches perform. And the color will also correspond to that same level of service we've been talking about, or LOS. I mentioned before with the letter grade from A to F, we're showing here. So let me describe that letter grade real quick. So a level of service A through C is generally considered good traffic operations. So little congestion, not a lot of traffic. While some congestion occurs at a level service D, the transportation system is assumed to be adequate and not failing at this level of service. Level of service E means that we are at unstable operations, or we're approaching unstable operations and nearly at failure, and any little thing could trigger failure. While level of service F is what it sounds like, it's failing traffic operations and there's a lot of congestion. So I wanted to give you a quick overview of that because we're going to be talking a lot about that here. These are the results of our traffic analysis, which shows traffic intersection operations for AM peak hour or rush hour for all 3 options. This is just the AM rush hour, and north is to the right, 4100 south here is on the left, and SR 201 is on the right here. You can see that all 3 options are shown here. The top one is option 3, which is our commuter lanes option. Option 6, which is our frontage road option, which is the middle one. And the bottom one here is that center running frontage road that we talked about, option 7. You can see that with all 3 options, when looking at the letters in each of these circles, that the intersections are operating at a level service D or better, which is great. There are a couple intersection approaches, which are these represented by these arrows, that are operating at a level service E, which is to be expected on a corridor like Bangerter Highway. However, since all of the intersections are operating at a level service D or better, it means that each of the options can handle the future traffic volumes that we're putting through it. I also wanted to point out that we have calculated a total delay for each of the options And this represents the total delay that was experienced by vehicles throughout the study area. So a combination of all of it aggregated together. Even though there is a difference in total delay between these three, they are close enough that there's really no differentiation between, there's no differentiator between these three options based on total delay. So overall, AM rush hour or AM peak hour is showing good operations and no differentiation really between the three options. So here is the results of our traffic analysis for the PM peak hour or rush hour for all three options. Again, north is to the right here, 201 on the right, 4100 south on the left, and all the intersections in between. We have our option 3B, which is the commuter lanes on top, the frontage road option in the middle, and the center running frontage road option on the bottom. So that option 7 that we talked about. Again, with all three options, when looking at the letters in each of the circles that are at the intersections, we are showing operations of a level service D or better, which is again, good operations. And again, even though the total delay here, we're showing some differences in total delay for each option is different. They're close enough that there's not a real big differentiator between those three for overall total delay. I do want to point out though, that you may see a few of these intersections with a level service F for the approach, these red arrows. And I wanted to, when you look at Parkway Boulevard here in particular, you can see that both options 3B and option 6 both have an approach that is a level service F, and that option 7 does not. And I don't want you to be deceived by that because I want to talk a little bit about that, what that means. So we're zooming in here to that area. North is to the right. Here's 2400 South, Parkway Boulevard, 3100 South. So we're looking at that same figure just at the three intersections. Commuter lanes is on the top, frontage road is in the middle, center frontage is on the bottom. And Parkway Boulevard, here are those level service E arrows that we talked about. So one of the things that we do when we are putting these options together in our traffic models is we adjust the lane geometry or the total number of lanes that we're looking at so that the intersection for each option will operate at a level of service D or better. So we started with the assumption that we have 2 lanes in each direction on the frontage road. So you can see that here on the top. This lane configuration worked for both options 3B and option 6. So these two options up here, but it did not work for option 7, where we had to increase the total number of southbound lanes here between 2400 South and 3100 South to 3 lanes. And we had to increase the total number of lanes. These are the travel lanes, the main travel lanes, to 3 northbound lanes between 3100 South and Parkway Boulevard. We had to do this because this option is the center running frontage road option, and the southbound lane utilization in the rightmost lane, so the outside lane, is over capacity. What that means is that there is a lot of cars, a lot of vehicles that want to use the rightmost southbound lane. And I'll tell you why here in just a second. So this is happening because there is a high volume of traffic attempting to access the freeway ramp or the ramp to the freeway, which is located on the right side of the road between Parkway Boulevard and 3100 South. There's also a large number of vehicles that are turning right to go westbound on 3100 South. So these two paths that vehicles are taking are both in the rightmost southbound lane, which is too much for the intersection at Parkway Boulevard to handle. So because all those cars are stacking up in that right-hand lane. So we had to add another southbound lane to make it work, which means that even though this option looks like it works better than the other two options, it actually requires more lanes, resulting in a wider roadway to make option 7 work. And one of the things I'd like to just kind of caveat this with is that as the Bangerter environmental study gets underway, some of these lane geometries may change even more as they take a deeper dive into these and other options. And so, you know, we're kind of scratching the surface of what a study could look like. These are, we've done a good job of kind of understanding traffic and understanding lane geometries. But again, things may change as we get into the Bangerter environmental study. So that's the traffic operations. I wanted to talk a little bit about connectivity because that's important to West Valley City. That's why it was one of our objectives we've been looking at, and why these three options were frankly selected as the three options to carry forward. So I wanted to show you a couple examples of how vehicles get to and from SR 201. However, I just want to caveat this again, that this requires some assumptions of what type of system will be constructed at SR 201. And there's a few different strategies that UDOT could employ at SR 201. In this case, we are assuming that the ramps from 201 connect directly to the frontage road system that we have here, in lieu of connecting to the Bangerter freeway system. So we have a direct connection to the frontage and not to the freeway system. We feel like this is a good assumption, as this would likely require a smaller overall footprint, meaning less impact, less cost to construct. But that could change depending on decisions made by UDOT during the environmental study and the amount of funding available to construct this interchange. So there's a lot of question marks around this area. But with that in mind, if someone was traveling from 2400 South for all three options, it's pretty much the same as you can see. This yellow path represents how they would get from 2400 South to SR 201. And it's relatively the same as you travel down south from here as well. So they would essentially turn left onto the frontage road system and then take a ramp that would then directly access to SR 201. So really good connectivity to SR 201 from any of these side streets as you go down from SR 201 all the way down to 35th South. So and that's the same with all these cases here where you would just basically turn left and then take a right to get onto SR 201. The option, the idea between connectivity between 201 and the frontage the opposite way, so coming from 201 to get to 2400 South, is equally as simple. You would get off from 201 off the off ramp, and then you would turn left on the frontage road. That off ramp would connect directly to the frontage road, and then you would travel down and then take a right onto, or a left, depending on which way you want to go, onto 2400 South and or any intersections south of that area. The same with all the other two options as well. So fairly simple maneuvers to get to and from these side streets. And that's one of the benefits of a frontage road system, is that you have really good connectivity between West Valley City service streets and SR 201.
Blake, you may want to mention that, what the orange balls are on your diagram there.
Yeah, good point. So the orange balls, these smaller ones just represent signalized intersections at grade. So like a typical traffic signal. So that's what the smaller ones represent. The larger ones just represented a full interchange, a grade separated interchange. So it has nothing to do with, it's not a roundabout or anything like that. So it was just a symbol to represent that there's an interchange there versus these smaller ones are signals. So you can see that option 6 has 2 traffic signals at each cross street, while option 7 has a single, and so does option 3B, has a single intersection. And one thing that we found is that, again, even though option 7, which is similar to option 6, even though it has a single traffic light, because of the lane utilization down around Parkway Boulevard, it doesn't operate as well as option 6, which has 2 traffic lights, which was a little counterintuitive to what we had originally believed, because we figured a single traffic light versus 2 traffic lights would be more efficient. And so kind of a unique thing because of the way traffic is flowing on these frontage roads and connecting into the freeway systems. So one other thing that we had to assume that will definitely be something that needs to be considered, but may or may not happen, is, and again, this could change based on the final strategy that UDOT implements at SR 201, but we've included some flyover ramps from 201 to southbound freeway, to the southbound Bangor Freeway, to accommodate a pretty heavy left turn that wants to travel and basically access the freeway and go south through West Valley City. And the same is true for the other direction, where we would have a northbound flyover that would then, from the freeway system, the Bangor Freeway system, that would then access SR 201 directly eastbound. And so those two movements in particular, that westbound 201 to southbound freeway, Bangor Freeway, and the northbound Bangor Freeway to eastbound SR 201 were pretty heavy movements. And we needed to do that to accommodate the traffic projections that we were seeing out there. And one thing to note is that that adds an additional level to the freeway system. So if you think about this freeway system as levels, SR 201 is like the base level, then the Bangor Freeway could be level number 1, and then the frontage roads could be level number 2, and then this would essentially be a third level on top of that. So it becomes kind of costly. And so those are the kind of things that UDOT will evaluate in their environmental study and discuss with the city and figure out what to do with regard to that. But for our assumptions, that's what we had to do to make the traffic work. So what I wanted to do was open it up for discussion and questions. I know I just went through a whole gaggle of information, so I appreciate your patience, but would love to clarify any questions that you have.
If I could jump in there, Blake, thank you for your presentation. As I looked at the traffic study diagrams, it seemed that option 3B was the best, but I think what you said was they're close enough that it doesn't matter. One's not better than the other. Is that right?
Yeah. So as we looked at it strictly from a traffic operations perspective, because there's a few things we need to look at, council member. We need to look at, not only do we need to look at traffic operations, but we need to understand connectivity and then impacts, right? All three of those things are going to be important for the final understanding of this. But strictly from a traffic operations perspective, there really isn't a big difference between all three options. The difference is option 7 is we had to add some lanes to make it work, like options 3B and option 6.
And the connectivity, weren't they essentially the same as well?
Yes, the difference is in connectivity is that, and if I can get back to this right here, is that option 6 and 7 provide better connectivity to and from the freeway. So that's the connectivity difference between the three options. Otherwise, their connectivity to the frontage road and then up to 201 is essentially the same.
You can get on the freeway more quickly between 3500 South and 201.
That's correct.
However, option 3B, you would just be driving along the frontage road until you can get on the freeway.
So you get on 201 or you go southbound or northbound. Yeah, exactly. So there's no, between 35th South and SR 201, there's no connection on option 3B to the freeway from the frontage road or vice versa.
But then it looks like option 3B is also likely to have the smallest footprint. Is that right?
Potentially, because you don't have these ramps right here will provide additional width. And that's something we're working through right now. Council member, we're trying to figure out exactly what that looks like. Not exactly, I should take that back. Strike that from the record. It's a really high level look at what that looks like. Again, we don't have survey. We don't have all the information that you would typically put into a major design effort like this, but we'll have a relatively good understanding of what the differences between each of the three options are with regard to overall width of the roadway and potential impacts. So did that answer your question, council member?
Yeah, so it looks like everything would favor 3B except if the connectivity is so poor that we ought to scratch that option and just look at the others and make a great big road through there and not worry about the impacts. It seems like if we're close on the connectivity or the connectivity will work, that it has the same traffic flow or the best traffic flow, it has the smallest footprint, that seems like an obvious choice unless I'm missing something. Of course, I want to hear what everybody else thinks too.
Yeah, and that's a really great observation. I think the only difference here is that if there is a need to get on the freeway, especially as you get close to 201, if that freeway extends north of 201, which I believe that there are plans to extend north of 201, there may not be a good option to get onto that freeway once you're north of 35th South, if you're on the frontage road system, if that makes sense. So in this option here, you would, if you're anywhere north of here in this area and you want to travel on the freeway north of SR 201 in the future as that develops, you would have to go down to 35th South to do that, which is out of direction travel, you know, but that may be okay. But you know,
wouldn't you be able to get on at 201?
So that, again, that kind of depends on what the overall option is that is selected by UDOT at that interchange. If they choose to select maybe a smaller, less impactful footprint, it's likely there may not be an option to get on and off the freeway at 201 from the frontage road system, because the SR 201 and the frontage road are connecting to each other and not the freeway and SR 201. So there's some nuance there that there's a lot of variables in that location that could easily change with you know, the various inputs that are collected during the environmental study, if that makes sense. But at this point, the way we're showing it is there wouldn't really be a good option to get onto the freeway northbound or southbound unless you go down to 35th South.
Couldn't that be part of our recommendation that we would recommend 3B and that they provide connectivity to the freeway at SR 201?
Yeah, I mean, that could be, and I mean, definitely something that could be considered.
And that if not, then maybe another option is the second best, but I wouldn't want to take what seems to be a good option off the table just because they might not do something that we haven't suggested to them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I definitely think it's something worth considering, you know, especially moving into that environmental study. I think that's something that could be considered along with, you know, this potential option here is option 6. You know, I mean, and kind of weigh those options as they dive into those details around SR 201 and understand that better, how the connectivity between option 3B and SR 201 would look, and then also between the frontage road system and the freeway system heading northbound as they travel north of SR 201. And you know, and just going back, council member, to the differences in operation between 6 and 3B, I wouldn't say one operates better than the other at this point. I think that there's some noise in our VISA models that is created that essentially, you know, we're seeing similar, I would call them similar operations at this point, just because of the high level we're looking at. As the environmental study dives deeper into the volumes and the traffic operations and doing some iterative work through it that we're not able to do with this project, they'll be able to differentiate that a little bit better than we can at this point. But I would say that 3B and 6 are really have similar operations overall. If that makes sense.
Yeah, all things being equal or near equal, then I would look for what has the least impact. I mean,
yeah. So that's a really good comment, council member, that there's 2 other things that we're looking at. Impacts is one of them, right? Impacts, and then connectivity is the other. So we looked at operations, they're relatively similar. So now let's look at impacts. Let's look at the general footprint that we're coming up with, and then let's talk about that connectivity and how important it is to the city. Like, is that connectivity to and from the freeway system really important? And I think maybe that's something we can discuss next time when we actually see, what those comparative footprints look like between option 6 and option 3B.
And although the purpose of the whole thing is to have better transportation, a marginal increase in bettering transportation weighed against enormous impacts doesn't sway me. I think that they need to be more balanced. We're not just looking for one and not the other. So let's keep that in mind.
And I appreciate that comment, council member. That's a really important comment. How do we balance these several objectives that we have? And I think one thing that we're going to be looking at is, how wide is that footprint for 3B? If it does, require the acquisition of homes on one side of the road and we have leftover space, do we go to do we go to option 6 because we have the space to do it now, if that makes sense? If we're going to be impacting, similar level of impact, just, with additional space. And that's something we're diving into. We're going to understand better at our next meeting in 2 weeks. I think it'll be kind of eye-opening for all of us as we kind of see how that works. Because it's really difficult at this point to tell, what level of impact both of these options are going to have relative to each other. Does that make sense?
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Those were great questions, though. I really appreciate that. Question.
Blake,
Yeah.
I have a question. On any of these, have you looked at the impact on 3500 South?
Yes, that's what we're doing right now, is we're looking at what that interchange looks like from an impact standpoint. And this area is pretty tough because there's a lot, these apartment complex on the west side here, the school on the east side, on the south of 35th South. So we are currently working through that, and we'll talk about that next time we meet. So
yeah, I just had a concern that if we're not getting people off of Bangerter until 3500, that the volumes going east and west may make 3500 so congested that now it's not functional. And then I really prefer number 6 just because it puts the slower traffic next to the residents instead of in the center of the freeway and have the freeway next to the residents. And I think my main concern would be whether or not letting people off until 3500 makes that east-west 3500 fell.
Yeah.
And then we would have more impact on 3500, which I don't think would be very good for the future.
Right. That's a really astute observation. One of the things that we're seeing, and I might need Ivan to jump in here a little bit, is that that the traffic volumes here, because we have a direct access to the frontage road system from SR 201, we are seeing a good distribution of traffic from 201 to the frontage road system, which then feeds Parkway and 2400 South and 3100 South. So we have an even distribution between accessing the frontage road and then those flyovers that we talked about accessing the freeway system, which would then, most people would then, a lot of that traffic volume would then travel south through 3500 South. So right now what we're showing our operations, what we're showing is that if we go back to those operational tables here, is that our 35th South in the AM is operating at a level service D or better for all 3 options. And then for all 3 options, again, level service D in the PM, we're seeing level service D. And this level of service E on the side street isn't too concerning. Again, that's, that's some of the noise that we see in a model this size, but because the overall operations of the intersection is at level service D for all 3 options, it actually works really well, considering that there's going to be a lot of traffic in this area. And that's partially due to the the fact that we're pulling a lot of traffic off of Bangerter Highway or the frontage road, the new frontage road, and putting it onto that freeway system. So it's bypassing these intersections altogether and not having to cause extra delay, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Blake-
in this next study, can you let us know what these intersections are functioning at now? If they're all A's, if they're all D's, if we're improving them or making them a lot worse as their service?
Yeah, and maybe Ivan can jump in here real quick because we did look at that as well. And Ivan, do you want to answer that question?
I can take a crack. I was more interested in getting back to the previous point, but generally speaking, most of these intersections are operating very poorly, like at E's and F's generally. Greg would know more on that. But back to the question of kind of traffic, more traffic using 35th South, for example, in option 3B, that is what we're seeing, that when we don't have as good a connectivity to the freeway system, we are seeing in our models that there will be a little more traffic on 35th South, not a dramatically more, but 5 to 7%. But there's also would be more traffic on some of the north-south roads, like 36 West, 32 West, 27th West. Basically, because they can't get on the freeway, the frontage roads have a lot of traffic. There's people using other ways. So by providing better access to the Bangerter Freeway, we do move more traffic off, generally speaking, off of the local city system. Generally speaking, we see at Parkway, we actually draw more in. So there's a little bit of nuance there, but generally speaking, there's lower volumes on some of the city streets, particularly the north-south city streets, when we have the better connectivity that options 6 and 7 provide.
So you're saying 3B would put more load on our city streets, our more slower 2-lane, 1-lane, like 36, 4,000, something right there close to 35th?
Yeah. Again, most of the differences aren't huge, typically in the neighborhood of 10 to 15% for the north-south roads, about 5% for 35th. But yes, with again the caveat that it does actually add more up at Parkway, which is one of our more difficult locations. But yeah, don't want to get too much in the details or the weeds here.
So that is an impact for our local streets as well. Okay, thank you so much.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a few questions and comments. The frontage road has stoplights at each of the cross streets. So wherever those slip ramps are, to get to them, you have to go possibly through multiple stoplights. Let me take first this first option 3B. One of my main concerns there is 3100 South, because it does not appear that there's good access. That's one of our main east-west streets, one of our major arteries. And for it not to directly connect onto this Bangerter Highway freeway is really difficult. And I have real concerns because it's so nebulous at the 201, because there is a lot of traffic that will go from Bangerter, from 31st, say, up Bangerter and get on 201. And they have the option there, depending upon traffic and accidents, to either go 201 and into I-15 or I-215, or they can continue north on Bangerter. But that option, unless you have that connectivity there, just doesn't seem to work. So I almost, on any of these, I say, that doesn't work. There's got to be connectivity there. That's one of the advantages of Bangerter, is you have options when you get to 201. So when I look at option 6, at least there at 35th South, or excuse me, 3100 South, you do have the slip ramps to get on and off from that. So that makes sense to me. Although I agree with Councilwoman Lang that on 7, having those slip ramps on the outside, which have less traffic than on the inside, I think would be more beneficial to the neighborhoods. So right now, your option 6 seems to stand out a little bit above the others, but it has that same problem at 201. And I just can't see not having connectivity, especially from all these industrial areas, the frontage roads and 2400 South, to be able to connect up with the, somehow 201, but I don't know. Maybe it's not significant, but right now I would say 6, then 7, and last 3B. But we've got to look at how we keep 3100 South able to access and get going north or to the 201. That's the end of my comments.
That's great. Thanks, Mayor. That's great input and comments.
Just, by the way, this Mayor again, just so you know, I don't like anything that doesn't include 3100 South. Real easy connectivity, because impact to me is initial impact. Once that initial impact is done, it's not that great in the future, but connectivity will be forever an issue. And accessibility anyway. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you everybody for your input and your thoughts. I really appreciate working with you because you are thoughtful when it comes to these different options. We will be back again in 2 weeks to look at those footprints. So we'll see you on February 9th, again at the next session. And I apologize for this being such a fast process. That wasn't our intent initially, but like Russ said, that this environmental study is coming out pretty quickly. And so we have to be done before that starts. And so that's kind of the impetus of getting this stuff done. But we are still taking the time we need to make sure it's correct as we move into it. So we appreciate it.
Okay, if we're meeting again in 2 weeks, now see, I guess I'm a little slower than the rest, so I need more help. And so this is going to be one of those, it's not a tour, but it's a sit-down meeting with Russ. And Russ, I'll be very careful. I'll double mask, and I've already got my immunization. So I want to sit down and go through these options in more detail around a table that you can point out and just get me a little better familiar with it and tell me what issues I'm missing on the other options and why some options are better than others. So, and I need to do that before we meet in 2 weeks. And Wayne, if you want to be in there, that's okay too. The more the merrier, because this is really moving fast. And I want to make sure that some of the issues, some of the things that UDOT did with Mountain View corridor in certain locations were a little questionable, but
Yeah, I probably
wanna-
actually will want to attend that meeting, Mayor. So thanks. I'm actually going to be gone out of town in 2 weeks, so I won't be here for the next presentation by the consultant anyway. So I'll probably want to take advantages of as many of those discussions as I can, whether the consultant's there or whether it's just our own staff. So thanks.
well, yeah, whichever works. And certainly I'm not opposed to other council members being there. Even if it has to be a noticed public meeting, but it's a meeting to maybe have some printouts, paper copies, and I can take and make marks on the paper and everything else. See what all these other high IQ council members don't need that, but a pencil and a marker for me with paper will be great. Great. I'll get a lot more out of it.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
Mayor, I would like to join that meeting too, because watching them on a small screen like this and trying to form an opinion, and by that time the screen has gone away, I'd like a sit down, explain it to me type of meeting.
Okay. And it would be nice if we could do that this week so that we then have at least a full week before we have that meeting in case we have to do any follow-up. So Russ, would you set up a meeting between the three of us? If any of you, the others want to be there, speak up or contact Russ later. And Russ, if you'll kind of coordinate that with Wayne and whoever else needs to be there.
Will do.
Or if Wayne
And
does it, I don't care. I don't care who sends me the meeting notice.
I let Nicole know that I would like to go to that meeting as well.
Okay.
But this week my schedule is tight, so got a lot of other meetings I have to attend.
Boy. The latest for me would be next Monday, the very, very latest. And I'm tied up most of the morning on that one.
Yeah, I think
Well, let's see what we can come up with. And if
Yeah.
we have to do 2 meetings, that's okay. This is a big issue. This has huge
Yes.
impact. Just once they start building it, it's going to affect a lot of people. So I'm willing to devote some more time to it. Maybe I'll go to both of them if there are 2 different ones. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. It Blake, sounds like we're for this meeting done, and we'll see if it's appropriate to have some of your staff there meet with us as well, depending upon when we do it. But we'll see how that all comes together. We'll talk offline on that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Then with that, we move to the next item on our agenda, which is our legislative update. And a lot of things are happening. And all kinds of people getting on here with us. So, although just so you know, Senate Bill 88 has kind of hit a high point for me. So I'll need to follow up a little bit on that. That's the ZAP tax thing. And with that, Ms. Cottle, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'm just here, exciting night to introduce Lincoln Schertz, who's on with us and is official as an employee with the city now, not as you know in the past been a contractor, but he's an employee now, and he will be providing the council with the weekly updates, both on the spreadsheet that you see usually about noon on Tuesdays, And then during council meetings, these legislative updates as well. So just wanted to introduce him and say how excited we are to have him on. And I'll turn the time over to him for an update and for questions from the council.
Thanks, Nicole. And first, thanks, Wayne and Nicole, for the opportunity to come to West Valley City as an employee. And thanks to the council and mayor. It's a bit of a homecoming for me, having worked with Nicole and Wayne and Mayor Bigelow for the better part of the last 20 years in both their legislative service as well as in their service at West Valley City. I'm certainly appreciative of the opportunity to come in-house with West Valley and represent you in kind of a full capacity in terms of your legislative issues. So thanks to the council and mayor, and certainly to the administration for the trust that you've given me to represent you guys on these important issues in your intergovernmental affairs services. As Nicole mentioned, we did pass out a spreadsheet for you to review of some of the pre-filed bills that are now starting to pop out. We're looking at about 50 bills a day coming out of Legislative Research and General Counsel. So the flurry of bills is going to start. And as we ran into this legislative session, we anticipated about 1,300 pieces of legislation, and many of those certainly have a municipal focus. So from that standpoint, there's going to be a lot to be watching this year. A couple of highlight points that I'll just touch on quickly this evening. One is transportation funding. The state is sitting on a $1.4 billion surplus, and there's a considerable amount of momentum around a potential bonding package to take some of that cash and put it towards infrastructure investment throughout the state that will be done primarily on state infrastructure through UDOT. But in addition to that, Representative Dunnigan also has a bill that he's working on in conjunction with Senator Harper that will look at allocating funds to individual cities on what's called the County of the First Class Restricted Fund as well. That bill just popped out today. Don't be alarmed. It is not a comprehensive bill. It shouldn't be a shock to this group, but the sponsors only took care of the cities that they directly represent, and certainly has left some folks off of that list. We knew that bill was coming, and we have been actively working with the Salt Lake County legislative delegation on expanding that list to include all cities. And obviously West Valley City will be a major player in that conversation as well. So actively involved in that effort, as well as the broader bonding effort that would support major infrastructure in the city, as was mentioned earlier. Bangerter Highway, U111, Mountain View Corridor are all top priorities for UDOT on future funding in any sort of bonding package. The other piece that I just wanted to make sure you're aware of, there's a lot of consideration around affordable housing and land use regulation as well this year. And obviously that goes to the heart of local government and our ability to control our land use policy within our city. So Nicole and I and the team have been actively working to ensure that we're protecting our interests on issues such as mandates for affordable housing, as well as how we handle accessory dwelling units. And then most importantly, there's a bill from Representative Paul Ray dealing with how we handle building inspections as well, where there had been some legislative concern around municipalities throughout the state and the time in which it's taking to deal with building inspections. So a lot of things to address. Nicole told me to keep it to a relatively short presentation. So those are just the high points. I will certainly be giving you a more detailed update in writing that you can look at your own time, and certainly happy to answer any questions. And thanks again to everybody. Certainly excited about the opportunity that's before us, and happy to be on the team. So thank you. With that, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay,
Lincoln, I have a question. Yeah,
Go ahead.
Lincoln.
Yes.
First off, welcome back to the team.
Thanks.
I'm looking at this spreadsheet, and it's great. It describes the bills, tells what they're doing and everything else, but it doesn't tell what we feel about them.
And that's obviously just coming on the team today. I want to sit down with Nicole and make sure I have an understanding. Having worked in local government for 20 years, I could probably guess where you would fall on many pieces of legislation. But yes, the next step will certainly be making sure that I have a clear understanding where the council is on these important issues.
If you could include that on the spreadsheet, that would help. As I go to other meetings with UASD, and I still sneak into the LPC since I can, since it's virtual.
Yeah.
And I need to know how we feel about what they're talking about.
Absolutely, council member. What we'll do is we'll put a priority ranking on bills and then also a position statement on each bill. So I'll have that quickly updated and get that back to you in short order.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Well, now that it's public, it's really interesting to see Lincoln here. So, of course, we'll have some comments later on offline, but we have a lot of history go back a ways. So,
Thanks, Mayor. Forward to working with you. And
looking
thanks.
forward to it. Although I'm a lot quieter now. The older I get, the less I say. That's because it's the less I know. So anyway, thank you. With that, I assume there were no more comments. Hearing none, we'll go right on. Thank you. Council calendar. And I'm okay if you do mix council calendar, future agenda items, and council reports, because there aren't that many of them. So are there any of those?
Mayor, I do have a proclamation request for the council to consider.
Okay.
It's not one that we have ever done, but it's for Lung Cancer Awareness Month. It came directly to us from the organization. It's mostly awareness for lung cancer screening.
Well, I guess I'll speak up. I usually do on these. Unless a council member has a burning, deep desire to take on one of these issues, and you would become somewhat the champion of them. There are thousands of groups out there that are very worthy. But I go back to the ones that we have historically supported. And it means more when we don't do everything that comes across. But if someone has a desire, if it's special, then we'll consider that. But since it didn't come from them, and I've discouraged a number of groups from getting a resolution from us. So I'm being consistent here. But council, what do you think?
Nicole,
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, who is the submission from? Is this just from a national office somewhere? Is it from a resident here in the city?
It looks like it's from a national office. So they just kind of send it out to many municipalities across the nation and post the approved proclamations to their website.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm in agreement with the mayor. I mean, the list of consistent or long-standing proclamations that we already have obviously can change, and we can add or subtract to that list. But I like where you're going with that, Mayor, that unless it's been brought up personally or someone raises it, I think that would be the best way to submit those.
And I think lung cancer especially is a big one that is well known, whereas some of the others are not. And,
Yes.
you know, there could be a cancer proclamation for a different type of cancer for probably every day of the year. And I know when I was working with the American Cancer Society on the walkathon that they had, Relay for Life, it was, you know, there were 15 different types of cancer that we were talking about, and you can do something for one of those every day of the year. So I think we need to limit ourselves just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, there are so many valuable causes. See, even as you're aware, I'm involved with some veterans issues, and even there are dozens and dozens and dozens of veterans projects going on all the time, locally, locally, immediate ones. And so, yeah, we'll just keep on this path unless someone changes it. So,
Sounds good to me.
were there any other?
A quick
calendar?
report,
Yes, sir.
not calendar, but a quick report.
Okay, fine.
I did attend the LPC, or at least listen to it, on Monday. Many of the bills that they oppose, I'm sure we oppose also. So I'm not going to go through all of those. And then yesterday we had a Healthy West Valley committee meeting, and I'll let Jake report on what's developing from that. But I think it's a great idea that we're following up with to get out to the community. So that's the extent of my report.
Yeah, thanks for that intro, for sure. So the Healthy West Valley Collaborative is very interested in making sure that more information is being provided. There have been a couple of recent webcasts or webinars, including state leaders who are accountable for this phased plan for vaccination and other things regarding COVID-19. And so it was decided that they would like to host two different webinars, one in English and one in Spanish, with that same 1 hour to 90-minute format, including the medical director of Granger Medical here, and then also the Westridge Clinic, so that we have some local West Valley perspective on this, as well as invited speakers from the state government, from the state health department, to be accountable when there are questions from our community about what's going on, what the phases are, how this is rolling out. And excellent response from Sam Johnson and team regarding the use of the city platform to host that webinar. And those plans are moving together pretty quick. We're looking at tentatively February, as early as February 11th, or the second week of February, for these webinars or webcasts.
Any others? I would then mention the chamber of which we're a part of. Chamber West is meeting now their legislative committee. They will be meeting twice a week, once to review bills that would impact businesses or any of the issues that the chamber is working on, and there are a lot. And then another meeting where we invite legislators to discuss with us particular bills that we're concerned about. And so I know several of you are involved there, and I will, obviously, I'm going to share our resolution on transportation with them once it passes. And then I know that I had some comments on ADUs and on the authority of inspections being taken away from cities and a few of those. So it's pretty clear where we stand on those. So those are pretty easy. So, and I'll be getting with other mayors in the chamber to look at how we can deal with those. So anytime you're interested, why the chamber is very involved, any of you are welcome to listen in to our meetings and know what's happening there. Oh, one other comment I would make from Friday, I have a meeting with every Friday on COVID-19 with the county, and they invite whoever wants to get on to that. You're all welcome. But on that, one of the issues that came up is the immunization process. The county has set appointments for all the doses that they have. they have a waiting list of 26,000. That's full. And so there's another, we're trying to figure out how to get more. But one of the things I suggested to Wayne, he was amenable to that, and that is that we have a link to COVID-19 county type issues on our webpage, and we're going to add a specific one for immunizations because a lot of the people who are currently involved in that, over 70, and I fit in that category, they are struggling a little bit because the county is overwhelmed and they don't quite know what to do now. And I talked with the county and they're not very, they say, well, send us an email. Okay, that's not the answer. Anyway, but we'll see if we can make that a little easier for our residents. And other than that, that we do not have a need for a closed session. So I think we're done. And that'll give us a little bit of a break before our 6:30 meeting.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Without objection, we will stand adjourned. Hearing no objections, we are adjourned unanimously. Thank you.